I wonder sometimes about the pictures that I find online. This one, for example. It is a great example of the parable of the lost sheep. But how on earth did the person taking this picture get the shot? And where were they standing? And how did they find that sheep anyway in that particularly precarious situation? I thought for a minute maybe it was a mountain goat and it could, jump back out, but I enlarged the picture. No, it's a sheep. So how do you rescue a sheep there? I wonder if it's photoshopped. But I don't know, I've had sheep, and they are not the smartest creatures on God's green earth. Even a blade of grass can startle them if it moves. So they can end up in places like that. Now there are those who would chastise the shepherd for leaving the 99 to go after the one. Spock, for example, who famously said, "Logic dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one." But the shepherd knows his flock. And he knows they're safe as long as they stick together. They have a leader sheep who will keep them more or less together. And they have a dog who will chase off any dangers. But the one that has wandered off is vulnerable because she's alone. She has no one watching over her. Anything could happen and there's no one to turn to. She could end up on a rock in a crevasse with no way to safety. Of course, the shepherd will go looking for her. Of course, this story is not really about sheep, and the other one's not really about a coin. They're really about the lost, the missing. Sinners maybe, disaffected maybe, feeling alone, unwanted, probably. United Methodist Bishop Karen Oliveto tells a story about a 15-year-old homeless boy named Todd, who used to worship at the church where she was serving. He was regular in his attendance until one Sunday he didn't show up. And a couple of more Sundays passed, and members of the church got worried because some of them knew what living on the streets was like. And so they went out looking for him. They couldn't find him. One Sunday he showed back up at church, and Pastor Karen greeted him with a hug. She said, "I missed you." And he said, "You missed me? No one ever notices when I'm gone, ever." In these two parables, the shepherd and the woman with the coin don't stop looking. They don't figure the sheep's probably dead or write the coin off as a loss. They keep looking until the lost has been found. When we are lost, we want to know somebody's looking for us. Some experts on church growth say we should not worry about those who have wandered off, but just focus instead on getting new people. And maybe that's true. But when we're the one who isn't here, we want somebody to notice. We want to know somebody is looking for us. Michelle Morris writes a blog called Grown Up by God, or Grown Up Bible. She wrote that she had wondered aloud in her blog one week whether anybody would notice if she didn't show up for worship. She didn't say whether she ever heard from anybody in her congregation, but she did say she received an invitation to another congregation from someone who knew she wasn't close enough to attend, and knew she was an ordained minister in a different denomination, and knew it was really unlikely she would accept the invitation, but nevertheless they invited her because they were so excited about their congregation, and they believed that there was a place there for her. And if she did show up, if she didn't show up one Sunday, she'd be missed. And then Michelle said, if we were excited about Jesus and excited about our church, then we would talk about it, not in a you better go to church so you don't go to hell kind of way, but in a "You cannot believe how incredible church was this Sunday." Or, "I heard the best story that reminded me of how Jesus is changing my life." And I kind of wonder, on this Back to Church Sunday, how many people were going out inviting their friends because they're excited about this church, or because I was nagging you about it for the last couple of weeks. Jesus told these parables because all the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around Jesus to listen to him. The Pharisees and legal experts were grumbling, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." He wanted to be very clear that he wasn't focused on the righteous, on the people who were already doing what God wanted them to do, but rather on the sinners, the outsiders, the rejected, the ones who didn't really feel like they belonged. In the 5th chapter of Luke, he reports that the Pharisees and their legal experts grumbled against the disciples. That seems to be a pattern. They said, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" And Jesus said, "Healthy people don't need a doctor, but sick people do. I didn't come to call righteous people, but sinners, to change their hearts and their lives." And here Jesus tells them twice, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who changes heart and life than over 99 righteous people who have no need to change hearts and lives. Jesus is very clear that our mission and ministry is to open our arms and our doors and our hearts not only to people like ourselves, but also and especially to those who may not feel like they fit any place. To those who send texts saying, "I'm glad you do what you do." To those who feel like maybe they've disappointed their church or their family because they're not like everybody else. To those who know they need to change their lives and just aren't sure how to do that. I had a conversation yesterday with a lady in the Dollar Tree, and she told me that her kids say she's being a lot nicer since she started going to church. She said church has changed her, and I said, "Good, because that's what it's supposed to do." In the last week, there have been 2 very high-profile suicides. Pastor Jared Wilson, who was an outspoken mental health advocate, and Gregory Ellis, the head of counseling and psychiatric services at the University of Pennsylvania. Depression made them feel like that sheep, alone, with no way out of their predicament. Depression is like that. It lies. Even to mental health professionals, even to ministers. And we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to talk about any of those things that cause people to feel isolated and unacceptable. It's almost like we think mental illness is contagious, or that poverty is, or addiction, or any of the many other things that keep people feeling unloved, unwanted, and unwelcome. It's almost like we think these things might cease to exist if we just don't talk about it, or if we pray hard enough. Jesus welcomed all the people that the temple rejected. He taught all the people who could not go and hear God's words in the temple because they were considered unclean or otherwise unworthy. He ate with the people that the law said he must not associate with. He welcomed the least, the last, and the lost. And that's what we're supposed to do. So let us reach out to the people that no one else welcomes. Let us go and find the ones standing on that rock, those lost sheep with no earthly idea how to get out of there, and help them find a way. Let us welcome them into this house as special guests in our midst. For this is the house where all means all, where all are acceptable and accepted in God's family, where all have value like the silver coin that that woman lost. Let us accept each other, no matter how different we may be from one another, just as God has accepted us. Please stand and join me in singing, Help Us Accept Each Other.